This is The Bracketologists, your home for March Madness coverage, presented by Anchor.
We're on the back nine of Conference Championship Week, and although we're loving it, we're ready for more. How's it going, guys? I'm Brandon Matula, and this is The Bracketologists, your home for March Madness coverage. We have a special guest today. He's a colleague of mine from my school's broadcasting network, and let me tell you, he's just as much of a March Madness fanatic as we are here at The Bracketologists. Introducing Jason Lippert.
Hey guys, thank you so much, Brandon, for allowing me to hop on here. This is the best time of the year for sports, and if you're like you and me as a March Madness fanatic, this is truly probably the pinnacle of sports during the sporting year. There's not really a better time to just sit down, relax in front of a couple of screens, and just watch some chaos unfold.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm so excited to get into things today. Thank you so much for joining us. We've got three bracketologists now. Tommy's not with us today, but we'll get him on next time. That's okay. But you guys better listen in close, because as we get closer, we have more experts talking on the matter. So get ready to go. So today is going to be a little bit different from past week in preview episodes because it's Conference Championship Week, and we're just a few days away from the Selection Sunday. We're going to start out with a roundtable discussion over teams that already won their championships and discuss a team that we have an eye on right now as they head into the tournament with their auto bid. We got to focus on the smaller guys, so we're going to be talking about that there. Next, we're going to give our first four/bubble teams some love and discuss what's at stake for each of those teams, how they can stay alive, and discuss what their potential is in the tournament if they make it. We'll then make some predictions for the remaining conference titles and name each of our teams of the week to watch this weekend. And I'm excited to get into it. What about you, Jason?
Oh yeah, this is obviously, just like I said, the perfect time of the year. You've got action everywhere. You got the mid-major conferences that are kind of wrapping up, and then the power conferences are just diving into the first couple of rounds here in the conference tournaments. It's unfolding kind of from today on through the rest of the weekend. And Selection Sunday is only a couple of days away. It's kind of hard to believe it. You go the whole year waiting for it, and it's right on your doorstep now. So definitely a super exciting time, and I can't wait to dive in.
Absolutely. Well, we have a lot to unpack today. Let's go ahead and get into it. Let's get this show on the road. Segment 1, let's go ahead and get into it. It's the current conference championships. Current conference champions we have an eye on as of right now. As y'all know, or some of y'all might know, the lesser conferences start a little bit earlier in the second week of March, and you have their championships early on, and they find out who's going to represent each conference pretty earlier than the bigger conferences. So we wanted to highlight some of the teams here that are really standing out to us. I'll start with you, Jason. Who is a team that has really stood out to you so far?
When I look at teams from mid-major conferences that I feel like have made an impact and have a chance to go deep in the tournament, I look at a South Dakota State. This is a Jackrabbits team that won the Summit League. They've won 21 games in a row. They went unbeaten in conference play. They're 30-4 on the season, one of only two teams that have won 30 games, right up there with Gonzaga. You're looking at them as probably right around a 12 seed or so. And if you look at them in a potential 12-5 matchup, think about it, a team like Alabama, who's incredibly inconsistent, depending on what Bama does in the SEC tournament this week, they might find themselves at that 5 spot. And a 12-5 spot against a team like an Alabama or someone else that might be a little bit inconsistent is a prime matchup for this Jackrabbit squad. This is a team that second in the country in scoring. They average almost 87 points a game, second only to Gonzaga, and they top the entire country in three-point shooting. It's kind of hard to believe they're shooting about 45% as a team for the entire season. This is arguably the best offense in college basketball, and they have a balanced scoring attack. They've got 3 guys that score over 14 a game, 7 guys total on their roster that are right at or above 8 points a game. So this is a balanced offensive attack that can beat you a variety of different ways. And all in all, I really feel like with the body of work that we've seen from this South Dakota State team and really their offensive lethality from pretty much everywhere across the court gives them a really good shot. If they get hot, you better watch out for them.
Man, love to hear it, Jason. Up until this point, I did not know there was a third team that had 30-plus wins. I knew Murray State had 30 wins, and I knew Gonzaga did. But, man, I did not know this Jackrabbits team had 30 wins. That is pretty incredible. And you said that they won 21 straight?
Yeah, they're on a 21-game win streak right now. They're on fire.
Yeah, that is pretty incredible. I don't think anybody's come close to that feat. Possibly Gonzaga, but that is truly incredible there. I know Gonzaga just lost recently, so they're not on a big win streak like that as of right now. Yeah, that's definitely a team I'm going to watch too. What really got me listening in was that their points per game, as you talked about, like one of the highest in the country. They're third in the country right now. That is like, those are the kind of numbers you need to look at when you're making your picks in the tournament. And I think a 12 seed, like we always talk on this show about like where teams are placed, if it's a good spot or not. Joe Lunardi, as you said, has them as a 12 seed as of right now. And I think that's a perfect spot. And I think if, as you said, if they go against an Alabama or an LSU, who's currently projected at that 5 seed, I really think South Dakota State can really take it. So I really appreciate that pick. That is a great pick for a team that really has a shot to be a Cinderella team. I'm going to go ahead and share mine. I mean, this one was pretty easy for me. As we know, there's other big conference champions out there, such as Murray State and Gonzaga. But I wanted to be fun. I wanted to pick someone kind of like what you picked with South Dakota State. And I picked Chattanooga. They had that big buzzer beater against Furman. I could not believe that game. That was like neck and neck the whole way. I just enjoyed watching that so much. And they're just going to be a team, in my opinion, that are just really going to make some noise in this tournament. They got 3 guys that I wanted to highlight. They got Malachi Smith, a sophomore. He's a guard, averaging 20 points per game, 7 rebounds, and 3 assists. As a sophomore, he's doing a lot for his team, but he's also got senior teammates in David Jean-Baptiste. He's the guy that hit that buzzer beater against Furman, averaging about 15 points per game, 3 rebounds, and 2 assists. And then another senior at forward, DeSosa, with 11 points, 7 rebounds, and about an assist, but he's got 1 block per game. So this is a team that, like, I am really intrigued by. They really just strike me as a team that's really disciplined. They only average 11 turnovers a game. I imagine that's pretty low. I haven't looked at the statistics for turnovers, but I think that is a very good statistic to have, because that's what those bigger teams in the tournament really bank on, is making you make mistakes down the stretch, because those big teams are used to the big spotlight. Chattanooga, they have that auto bid, so they're definitely in, and they're currently slated to be a 13 seed, and they would go against Providence, who's currently competing in the Big East tournament. So not the best spot. I think they could upset Providence, but I mean, I think they could give them a run for their money. But if they can get past Providence, I think Chattanooga can go a long way, possibly the Sweet 16, because my confidence right now is not very high in Texas. I know they're winning right now against TCU in the Big 12 championship, but Texas is just not a team that I'm confident in. So that's the kind of thought that I put in when thinking about Chattanooga. How do you feel about Chattanooga, Jason?
Yeah, you mentioned the guard play with Malachi Smith and David Jean-Baptiste. These are 2 guys that have kind of been there and done that a little bit. They have some experience. And, of course, when you get to the NCAA tournament, it really is all about guard play. You're not going to win if you don't have strong guards that can take care of the basketball, limit turnovers, like you mentioned. And Chattanooga has a little bit of a game plan there. I think the X factor is Silvio De Souza. This is a guy that, transferred from Kansas, as looking to kind of reestablish himself as a name to watch and look out for in college basketball. He's averaging about 11-7 this season for Chattanooga, and I think he can be a difference maker for them inside and provide a presence. This is a team that I'm really curious to see what they do whenever they find their matchup in the first round, because their only real tournament test that they had this year was at Murray State, which they lost 87-76. I think obviously Murray State, you mentioned earlier, a 30-win team. They're going to be a problem for whoever they get in a matchup in the tournament. But I'm really, really interested in seeing what Chattanooga can do if they get some type of favorable matchup. Like I said, it comes down to guard play. And if their guards can execute and take care of the basketball while feeding open teammates, I think Chattanooga does have a good spot to kind of make some noise in this tournament and potentially take that step to the Sweet 16. I think it's going to be a little bit more difficult for them to get to the Sweet 16 compared to a team like South Dakota State, but they absolutely are capable of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm really happy with both of our picks. I'm glad we went small. Like, we could have made this really easy and just picked Murray State and Gonzaga, but we got to give love to the smaller teams, because that's what this tournament is all about, is giving everybody a shot and giving everybody the spotlight if they can earn it. So great picks there. Let us know what y'all feel is the best conference champion so far early in conference championship week. We're going to go ahead and move on to our bubble teams. This is not really something that we've talked too much about on this show, is bubble teams. For those who don't know, teams who are quote unquote on the bubble are teams that are right in or right out of the tournament. Usually you have, they usually divide it in 4 categories. It's the last 4 byes, meaning these are the last 4 teams that don't need to play in the first 4, which is hosted in Dayton, Ohio. Is that correct, Jason?
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah. And then the last 4 in, those are the 4 teams that play in the first 4. And then you got first 4 out, which are the last teams. And usually those teams go to the NIT tournament. Those are the 1 seeds in that. And then the next 4 out are just teams further away. But we wanted to look at these teams and really study them and pick teams that are making noise, or just talk about them, because last year we had a first 4 team make it to the Final Four. So that could very well happen once again. Jason, once again, I'll start with you. Who is a team, in your opinion, that is really standing out to you on the bubble right now?
Yeah, I really kind of look over to the Mountain West. You've got it's probably a 4-team bid league this year. And one of the teams that's kind of not really being talked about out of that group is Wyoming. Mm-hmm. This is a Cowboys team that finished 24-7 this season. They had, right around the turn of the year in January, a handful of games that were postponed and kind of moved to later on. Some of them were not made up. This is a team that really needs to at least win, I think, 1, probably 2 games in the Mountain West Conference tournament to be able to confirm their spot. They're right now listed in Joe Lunardi's last 4 in as a second of those 4 teams that are in. So they're currently inside on that bubble. But, I mean, this is a team that really has struggled down the stretch of late. They lost to New Mexico on the road. They lost at Colorado State, which, of course, definitely not an easy place to get a win over in Moby. But it's still a difficult kind of into the season for them. They lost at UNLV against San Diego State, and then they have a rematch against the Running Rebels today, I believe at 4:30 this afternoon, whenever they take on UNLV in the conference tournament. But this is a Wyoming team that really needs to kind of recenter and refine their identity. I believe they probably should get in. I think they're going to take care of business today against UNLV. But with this team, you absolutely have to win today to secure that spot and make sure that you're still alive, and then move on to tomorrow's game. If they win today, regardless of who they get, that top 4 in the Mountain West is a gauntlet, and they're more than likely going to have to win a second game in order to really feel comfortable going into Sunday afternoon. If they don't, then it's going to be a pretty warm seat there for them waiting for that call on Sunday afternoon. But I do like Wyoming. I think they've been tested and kind of battle hardened there in the Mountain West, which is a league that a lot of people sleep on. Like I mentioned, there's probably, if Wyoming gets in, there's 4 teams in that league that are going to end up getting berths into the tournament. And that's a big deal for mid-major conferences. These are teams that are, conferences that usually get 1, maybe 2 teams in. They're looking at 4 teams right now. You mentioned Colorado State earlier, a team that has been red hot. I really, really do like Wyoming. They've got a guy like Graham Ike who's scoring about 20 points a game. Hunter Maldonado is right up there at around 19 a game. If they can get any type of consistent contributions on offense from outside of those 2 guys, I think they have a pretty solid chance of getting into the tournament. So that's one team that is currently on the bubble that I really enjoy looking at. They're fascinating to me. And I think if they get 1 or 2 wins here in the next couple of days, they'll be a firm lock to get in.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Looking at the projections right now, they're at the top of the last 4. And so in my eyes, what that means, I think if they lose, because I think they have a bye, so if they lose this upcoming conference game, I really believe that their spot could be in jeopardy. But if they win, the more they win, as you said, I think they have a better chance to get in, and they might have a last 4 bye. So that would be good news for Wyoming. But even if they get in at that last 4 spot, I really think, I would really favor them over SMU. SMU just really doesn't favor me right now. I'm looking at Joe Lunardi's projections, and if they got in a matchup against Texas, as I said earlier, I'm not very confident in Texas. So
right,
Wyoming, wherever they'll land, they'll have a good spot. So I'm pretty confident in them. We'll have to see what happens, but I'd like to share my team. They're not currently on the last 4 anymore. So a team that I wanted to highlight was Memphis Tigers. They have been incredible down the stretch in this season. It all started with their away win, not their home win. Their away win over Houston. Houston was ranked at about 13 at the time, and Memphis has just been struggling all year because, as we know, they had pretty much the number 1 overall recruit in Imani Bates, and everybody was just waiting for Memphis to pop off this year. They had Jalen Duren as well. He's been really great down the stretch, but as far as their aspirations this season, many Memphis fans will say it's been disappointing, but it's really been due to their injuries. But now they're getting healthy right at the right time, and I'm excited to see what they do in the American tournament. I really think they are the best team right now in the American Conference. I know Houston's ranked at 18, and they're currently slated at a 5 seed, according to Joe Lunardi. But Memphis, man, they have really, really impressed me. I watched the game against their game against Houston at home. They won that by a long slide. They were up by 25 at one point in the second half. 26 actually in the second half. So this is a team that is just a great, they're not necessarily great shooters, not great skill wise. They're just athletes. They can out athlete pretty much anyone in the country. There's not really a guy that I watched that day that really stood out to me because they don't have their star player in Imani Bates, but Jalen Duren really impresses me on defense, but just their half court press that they do, or full court press that they do, really impressed me, and how long they were able to do it and how they were able to just dominate the Cougars at home. And this next, they'll potentially play them in the championship of the American. And I'm really favoring the Tigers in that matchup. And if they can win, if they can get to the championship, the American championship, I really feel that the Tigers will solidify their spot. I don't think they're worried anymore about getting into the tournament because last I looked, they were a last 4 bye, and now they're not there anymore. They're solidified in the tournament, but that doesn't mean they're safe. They need to keep winning games. If they lose early, then it may not be good for the Tigers, but I don't see that happening. I really like them right now. How do you feel about Memphis, Jason?
Yeah, Memphis is a team that I like right now. Obviously, you kind of kind of pointed towards it, that they've just been incredibly inconsistent this season. You've wondered at times if Penny Hardaway is on the hot seat in Memphis. And like you mentioned, they have athletes. And that is one thing that can travel and kind of be a positive for you in the tournament. But we also know that in the tournament, it really, like I mentioned, favors guard play, and it favors guys that have been there and been able to experience high pressure situations like that before. So really curious to see kind of what they do going through this conference tournament. This is a team that earned the 3 seed in the American. And so you're hoping that they can at least get to that next round where they can take on either an SMU or whoever's going to come out from that game. SMU, obviously another team that's right there in that bubble talk. Memphis has been in that area all year. You mentioned they were ranked to begin the season. They fell out of the rankings. They've had good wins. They played well against Houston. Like this is a team that has shown flashes. To me, it's just all about, can you piece this together for 40 minutes? And again, we've seen that at times. I think they have the athletes to accomplish that and to get that together. It's just a matter of, will they do that? And I think that's really going to be a matchup to look out for here in the American. If they do end up going up against a team like SMU in that quarterfinal, the semifinal, I really do feel like that could be a de facto elimination game in the tournament. That might be a case of, you got 2 teams that are right there on the fringe of the bubble, and whichever team wins gets a stamp into the tournament as an at-large, and the other team might be on the outside looking in. Coach Hardaway has got a lot of experience in the game. He has been inconsistent, but if they can piece it together, I really like looking out for them as well.
Yes, absolutely. He's been on the hot seat all year. I was actually pretty critical of him. He just hasn't had a successful tenure, because you remember he had James Wiseman and Precious Achua a few years back, and they were nowhere near where they should have been. I think they were right on the outskirts of, or right inside the top 25. I think they were 24, and then they lost their last regular season game before the pandemic started. And last season they couldn't get into the tournament. They ended up winning the NIT, and Memphis has a pretty, I wouldn't say a rich history, but a pretty successful history in basketball. And the NIT championship is just not what the Tigers are looking for. They're looking for getting to the Final Four again, back when they did it with Derrick Rose. That's what they're trying to get back to. And I think they're making the right step, and it's really going to come down to what happens this weekend. As you said, I'm really excited for that SMU matchup, because the American tournament is hosted in Fort Worth. SMU is just a 30-minute drive away. So you can imagine there's going to be a lot of SMU fans there. So I just imagine that game pretty much being a championship game. I know Houston's going to get a lot of fans up there too if they make it to the championship, but if you're going to pick one matchup to watch in the American tournament, that's going to be the one to watch between SMU and Memphis, because SMU really gave it to them a few weeks back. But yeah, that's all I had to say about Memphis. But before we go, I wanted to get your thoughts on a team that's kind of had my attention. I just don't know what to make of them. Rutgers. They made it to the tournament last year. They got to the round of 32, lost to Houston there. And I don't know what to make of them this season, because they went on a 4-game win streak, beating number 13 Michigan State, number 16 Ohio State, number 14 Wisconsin, who won the conference or tied for the conference. And then they beat Illinois, a co-champion of the conference. And they beat these teams, pretty much all of them, pretty convincingly, with the exception to Ohio State. And then they go on a 3-game losing streak, and then they win their last 2. But they're currently looking at their spot. They're one of the last 4 buys, and I just don't know what to make of this team. Do you have anything on the Rutgers, Jason?
Yeah, Rutgers is just a team that it's almost a Jekyll and Hyde this season that you've seen from the Scarlet Knights. You mentioned the 4 straight wins over ranked opponents here at the beginning of the first half of February. And then they had that losing streak. They've had opportunities to pick up ranked wins. That first of the 3 losses was against Purdue. And that one, they were in it for a little bit, but then down the stretch, it was just too much for the Boilermakers for Rutgers to overcome. They actually did beat Purdue earlier this season, back on December 9th, when Purdue was ranked number 1. They had a 2-point victory there at home, and you're getting contributions from Harper Jr., who's been playing really well this season. But this is a team that, as you mentioned, they've been hot and they've been cold. These last 2 wins against Indiana and Penn State were by the skin of their teeth. This is a team that really, really needs to get a win to kind of survive and, move on here. This is a team that's kind of waiting to figure out what their matchup is going to be. It looks like it's probably going to be Iowa, assuming Iowa hangs on right now. But this is, a team that they really are in a precarious spot because it all comes down to this one game. They've played well against elite teams, but there's some head scratchers there on the schedule when you look at who they've beaten and then who they've lost to. The middle of those 3 losses recently was on the road at Michigan, which there's no shame in losing on the road in the Big Ten to anyone that's either at the top or in the middle of the conference. Michigan, however, is another one of those teams that is kind of fringe on the bubble. And so if you're Rutgers, I think you're happy to be in this situation. If you were told at the beginning of the season as a Rutgers fan, hey, you guys are going to be, in a position where if you win one game, you're going to get in the tournament, most likely. But, at the same time, this is just a team that has been very hot and cold. So it's going to be interesting to see which Rutgers team we get to see tomorrow. When they play tomorrow at 1:00 Central Time, I think this is a team that if they win, they're in. But again, there's no guarantee with who they're playing. They're going up against an Iowa team that's also been kind of all over the place this year. Iowa ended up getting the 5 seed in the Big Ten tournament bracket. And these 2 teams played once earlier this season. It was a 2-point game, 48-46, very defensive oriented. And I think that slower pace will favor Rutgers if they can keep that score lower against Iowa, again, assuming Iowa wins today and moves on. I kind of like Rutgers' chances. I feel like these last 2 wins, even though they were really close, that kind of helped right the ship. And honestly, sometimes as a college basketball team and a program, all you really need to see is that first win. It's like a domino that's dropping. You're on a 3-game losing streak against 3 quality teams, 2 ranked teams. And then you come back with a pair of wins. Granted, yes, they were close wins. One of them is against an Indiana team that is right there on the edge of the bubble. So I think that's a confidence builder for sure. And going into tomorrow's game, I'm leaning slightly towards Rutgers over Iowa in that game. And if they can pull off what I think would probably be a bit of an upset, if you look at the line, I'm not sure what the line is, assuming Iowa wins today. But I feel like Rutgers would probably be maybe a 2 or 3 point underdog in that matchup. If they can get that win, I really, really feel good about them. And I think they're a team that, depending on what type of matchup they get in the tournament, they could win a game in this tournament for sure.
Yeah, they almost upset a team that went to the Final Four last year. They really impressed me watching them last year, and they've impressed me this year. So I think the players are going to understand how heavy this moment is. Like, yes, hosting ranked teams and going on the road beating ranked teams, like that's exciting, but this is the real thing. And if they want to stay alive and extend their season in the right way, because regardless, I think they're going to play in the postseason. I think they would take an NIT bid if they fell, but in my eyes, they want to extend their season the right way and they want to come back to the tournament. I really think this team can make some noise because we've seen that they can beat highly ranked teams. They just seem like a team that just, in my eyes, I feel like the guys look at their phones before the game and they see, I see a number next to this team. This is going to be the one we need to go all out. And that's what they do because they have a winning record this year against ranked teams. And that's just the mindset that you need to have to beat them, but it's not the mindset to have when needing to win necessary but less important games compared to ranked teams. So I'm excited to see what they do as well, but we will have to see. And this is a great segue into our next segment. We've been talking about the smaller teams. Now we're going to talk about the big teams. We're going to predict conference championship winners of this weekend. It's all the big conferences this weekend. We're going to predict the American, the Big East, Big 12, Big 10, Pac-12, Mountain West, and probably the most important of them all, the ACC. We'll start with the American. Jason, who do you have in the American going into this weekend as they start today?
Yeah, I still feel confident in Houston as a team. This is a team that has, had a little bit of an up and down this season, but I really like the resolve of this Cougars team. This is not a team that is as good as last year's team that reached the Final Four, but I think they still have what it takes to get through, especially on that top side of the bracket in the American. If they win this first game that they play, they're going to be playing either Tulane or Temple. I don't think they'll have an issue with either of those teams, and automatically you're sitting there in the championship game, and you're more than likely going to get either SMU or Memphis. And you did mention earlier, the way that Memphis was able to play against Houston, but I still feel confident in this Cougar squad, and I really don't see a scenario in which Houston does not win this conference tournament. They've got guys that have experience, that were there a year ago. I know you obviously don't have guys like a Quentin Grimes there anymore, but this is a team that I think has what it takes to win this American. And I think, at least for me, that's one of the easier picks among all the power conference tournaments.
Yeah, absolutely. I myself am a Cougar fan, but I got to say, I'm not very confident in the Cougars right now going into this tournament. I love to hear that you are, but it's interesting that the fan isn't confident. I'm not confident because I just haven't liked the way they've played Memphis, because Houston's a team that they'll lose their first matchup against a conference team and then they'll beat them the next. You saw them do that against SMU. And then Memphis beats them at home, and then they get beat by 20 on the road. So I just don't like their chance. It depends who Houston plays in the championship. If SMU, because SMU has had Memphis's number this season, if SMU can beat Memphis and get to the championship against Houston, I think Houston will beat SMU. But for some reason, I think Memphis just has Houston's number. So I'm going to go with the Tigers. I think they're fighting for more because Houston's pretty much set in the tournament. I think they're confident in their abilities to make the tournament even if they lost in the first round. So the Tigers are fighting more for more. So I'm going to go with the Tigers.
And I will say, just to add on to this, with Houston and Memphis, you're absolutely right that Memphis has had Houston's number so far this season. That being said, it is very, very difficult for any team to beat another team 3 times in a single season. It's one thing to sweep the regular season matchup. It's so difficult. I don't know if it's a psychological aspect of the matchup, but we've seen this time and time again throughout, however long you've been a college basketball fan watching. You might be 0-2 against that team on the season. It is very difficult to lose, or on the flip side for Memphis, to win 3 times against an opponent in a single season. I think Houston will have the right mindset going into this tournament. Before that loss against Memphis, they were on a win streak that was spanning together. And to your point, saying that you'd feel more comfortable playing an SMU team as a Houston fan, SMU did get that first matchup, 2-point win at home, but that's also an SMU team that has not lost at all at home. They're perfectly unblemished on their home floor, but this is not at SMU. This is a neutral site game. So it's going to be interesting to see. I think if Houston gets the matchup against SMU in the championship, they win comfortably. If they get the matchup against Memphis, I think it'll be a lot closer of a game, but I still like the Cougars.
Good to hear. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the Big East. Very competitive conference this year, very powerful teams. I really studied their bracket because it was just interesting where everybody was placed this year. I really like Villanova. And here's why. They've won the big games down the stretch, and I'm just confident in their abilities to get to where they need to be. I think Providence, in my opinion, at the 1 seed, I think they're playing too many hungry teams in this tournament because they play the winner of Xavier and Butler. I think Xavier currently is holding that lead. They actually just beat Butler. Sorry, that was I'm looking at the bracket here. So I think their path to the tournament is a little bit tougher than Villanova's. Actually, you might sound surprised hearing that, but I just really think Villanova has UConn's number, especially in the Big East tournament. And I'm liking their resolve in the postseason. And I'm just going to go with the Noles, or I forgot. I always forget their name, but Villanova. I'm taking Villanova.
Villanova Wildcats. The Cats have been a good team this season. They've had their moments where they've looked iffy. You remember the road game in non-conference play in Waco against Baylor, where they had one of their lowest scoring outputs of the Jay Wright era. But they've bounced back, and it really all starts with point guard play. Colin Gillespie has been phenomenal. He's a finalist this year for Point Guard of the Year. He's really been the motor for this team. Everything starts and ends with Colin Gillespie with that Villanova team. And I really, really feel like if he's healthy, which he has been here down the stretch, then I think you also, I agree with you. I think you ride with Villanova in this tournament. They're in a place where, they're taking on St. John's. I think they win that without an issue. And then they're going to look at whoever wins between Seton Hall and Connecticut. I feel strongly that Connecticut's going to win that game, but I also really just like the matchup of Nova over Connecticut there. And then, like you mentioned, the top part of that bracket, Providence did not look very good today. That you mentioned that game just went final not too long ago against Butler. This is a Butler team that is way down from, the Butler that we know and love from, this past decade. It's not the same team right now. And the fact that Providence needed all 40 minutes to be able to dispose of Butler, I think that spells a little bit of trouble for Providence. I think the Friars are going to need some help in maybe if Villanova can get unseated by a team like UConn, I think they have a better chance at winning the tournament. But I'm right there with you. I really like the Wildcats in the Big East. This is a team that, yes, they're the 2 seed, but when you think of Big East, or at least when I think of the Big East Conference, I think of Villanova first before Providence this season. And I feel more confident in a team that has been there. They have veteran players. They have arguably a top 3 coach in college basketball in Jay Wright. And I think that gives them the edge in this tournament.
Absolutely. And one more thing I'd like to add, I think they have a chip on their shoulder because Providence took the regular season title. So
yes,
that was a big factor into my thinking of picking Villanova for this win. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the Big 12 tournament. In my opinion, this is the second biggest tournament to watch this weekend. So if you have nothing going on, this is the tournament. One of the few tournaments you need to watch. Just a lot of teams fighting for not even spots at this point. It's placement. I'm excited to watch this. We just saw TCU beat Texas again, y'all. I'm telling y'all, Texas is just not a team you need to put your chips in to while you're filling out your bracket. I think TCU Kansas is going to be really interesting. This is not at the Fog this time, and Kansas is going to get to that championship game, and I believe they'll get to that championship game. But I really think Baylor has their number. They didn't sweep the season series like as Jason attested to earlier about how important that could be if sweeping the regular season series, but I really like Baylor going into this tournament. I'm liking their resolve. I like that their 7-man rotation. I think that's just incredible. They've been able to possibly repeat as champions as a 7-team rotation right now. That's just incredible. And one thing I'd like to point out, though, if they win this tournament in the Big 12, expect them to get out a little bit earlier than usual in the big tournament, because that's, in my opinion, I think that's what got them the national championship last year, is because they lost a little early in the Big 12 tournament. They rested, got the rest that they needed. They learned from their loss against Oklahoma State, and they went and really just did a number on that tournament last year. But I want to hear how you feel, Jason, because I know you're a Baylor guy yourself. So how are you feeling about the Bears' chances heading into this tournament? And if not, who do you got?
Yeah, I still am a little hesitant. I don't think Baylor will win this tournament. I think they have a chance to win. But to your point, this is a team that is currently employing a 7-man rotation. It's sometimes even a 6-man rotation. We've seen a couple of games down the stretch where they haven't really utilized Dale Bonner a whole lot off the bench. But this is a team that has just been absolutely decimated by injuries. And I know that Texas Tech fans were throwing fits that Mark Adams was not selected as the Big 12 Coach of the Year by the conference. Scott Drew was awarded that. The AP did award Adams with the Big 12 Coach of the Year on the national scale. But I think either one of those coaches would have been deserving. But you really can't give Scott Drew enough credit for what he's done with this team this year. This is a team that lost 4 starters from last year's national championship squad, including a key contributor off the bench as well. And you're asking them to do something massive when you say, hey, let's reload and run it back. And then on top of that, they lose not only 2, but 3 guys to season-ending injuries this year. You had Langston Love go down before the season ever started. And he's a guy that would have been in the rotation. I don't think he would have started, but he would have been the first or second guy off of the bench for this team. And then you've got Jonathan Chachua, who went down at that home game against Texas early on. That was a massive blow. He's the best defender on the team and the best rebounder, and it's just a massive energy guy, one of the biggest energy guys in college basketball. And to lose him and to still be where you're at as a team that won a share of the conference, that's incredible. It's a testament to the program that Scott Drew has built there in Waco. And like you mentioned, last year, Baylor was knocked out in the second round against Oklahoma State and Cade Cunningham. I think that also was a huge benefit for them because they were able to get that extra day or 2 of rest and then go into the tournament with more fresh legs and make that 6-game run. And then, just completely dismantle Gonzaga in the championship. I think in this instance, Baylor probably, it would be better for them to not win the whole thing in terms of longevity in the tournament, but they are not fully locked in as a 1 seed in the tournament yet. I think they need to, at the bare minimum, beat OU tonight. And OU is not a team that is just a puller. This is a team that really hit a rut last month, but they're starting to come back and catch fire a little bit. And they're desperate because they're on the outside right now looking in. They have work to do to be able to get back into the tournament picture. And I think OU is going to be desperate. They're going to be hungry. And if Baylor is caught napping, they're going to have an early exit. That being said, if they win, they're going to take on the winner of Texas Tech and Iowa State. Baylor has not matched up all that well against either team. Iowa State's a team that loves to slow the pace. Same with Texas Tech. Both are 2 defensive-minded programs. And Tech has had Baylor's number this year. It's also important to note Tech has been kind of mediocre when away from Lubbock. They had a perfect home record this season, arguably the best team at home in all of college basketball. But on the road has been a different story for the Red Raiders. So it's going to be interesting to see who can win that game later tonight. That's the night game in the Big 12 tournament today. And I would not count out Iowa State. And if Iowa State wins, we saw what they did in Waco, the last game of the regular season last week on Saturday. Baylor was up by almost 30 points and then almost blew that entire game. They blew the lead, and Iowa State took the lead, but Baylor clawed back and was able to win that to clinch a share of the conference. But on the opposite side, you're looking at a Kansas team that's taking on West Virginia. I think that should be an easy win for the Jayhawks. And then they're going to take on TCU. And this is a TCU squad that Kansas has seen now twice in the past week. And TCU got one of those games in Fort Worth. So this is not a Horned Frogs team that is to be taken lightly. I think they're a sleeper team in the tournament. That's not going to be easy. But I think if Kansas can get past them, I think the Jayhawks will end up taking this conference tournament. But really, to me, this is the power conference tournament that is the most open. I genuinely think you could see 5 different teams lay claim to a championship bid in this tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. TCU really entices me too. They were a team of the weekend in the past episode. In a past episode, they, in my opinion, they are just a team that just really has come alive in the month of March. And I'm excited to see what they do in this tournament. They've already beaten Texas. It's going to be a tall task beating Kansas in their home state, but I think it can be done. So Big 12 is definitely one to watch. So make sure you guys watch that. Let's move on to the Big 10. I didn't really put a ton of thought into this. I really like Wisconsin because Wisconsin didn't finish too well in their last game. I think they lost to Nebraska, I think it was. And I really like them going into this tournament with a chip on their shoulder because they could have outright won the Big 10 regular season title, but they dropped it. And now I think it's a 3 or a 4 team tie. So great for Wisconsin getting a share of that title, but I think they want to take it all, and I think they're going to take it all. I really like their guards. I really like their shooting. They won the Maui tournament, as I mentioned in the previous episode. I'm really excited to see them play, and I expect great things out of them in the tournament. What about you, Jason?
Yeah, the Big 10 is a very, very deep conference. When you're looking at teams that are, right there to make the tournament, I think they've got probably 8 teams that either will get into the tournament or are right on the cusp. We mentioned, Rutgers. Another team to watch out for is Indiana, who actually just upset Michigan earlier today, and we'll get the draw tomorrow against Illinois. In this tournament bracket, I think I'm with you. I like Wisconsin. It's going to be a challenge for them once they get to that quarterfinal, assuming that they win. Whoever they play, whether that's Maryland or Michigan State, that's not going to be the easiest out, but I think they'll take care of business. And then below them, they're going to be playing probably either Ohio State or Purdue. And neither of those teams are easy outs, but Wisconsin did beat Purdue recently. If you look at their schedule just on March 1st, just a little over a week ago, had a 3-point win at home against the Boilermakers. You mentioned that loss to Nebraska this past week on Sunday. Obviously, a really bad loss against a team that's not even remotely close to making a run to the tournament. But for Wisconsin, I think you've got a guy like Johnny Davis, who's a contender for National Player of the Year. You've got a well-coached squad that I think has the depth and the experience to make a push, not just in the Big Ten tournament, but in the NCAA tournament as a whole. It's going to be tough to get past Purdue or Ohio State, but I think they have what it takes, and they can take on whoever else comes from the top part of that bracket. I would give Wisconsin the edge. So I'm with you. I like the Badgers. I will say a team that you do not want to sleep on is Indiana. And I know you're thinking, well, it's Indiana. They're the 9 seed in the bracket. Teams that are motivated by the bubble are desperate teams, and desperate teams are dangerous teams. And Indiana right now is a dangerous team. They took on Michigan today. They got that win. Illinois did get the number 1 seed in this tournament. I'm still not fully convinced on Illinois being a team that can push all the way to the Final Four. They're a little too inconsistent for my liking. They do have Kofi Cockburn, but there still is just a lot of questions with that team when it comes to the consistency and how they're going to produce here this March. I would look at a team like Indiana that is very motivated to try and punch their ticket to the dance. I wouldn't be surprised if they upset Illinois. And then if they're looking at a quarterfinal matchup against a team like Iowa or Rutgers, I wouldn't be surprised if they sneak their way. Granted, it's not likely, but look out for the Hoosiers because I think they can make some noise in this tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. First 4 team out. I mean, you're literally from the outside looking in there. So I think the Indiana Hoosiers are going to play motivated basketball. And as you said, desperate teams are dangerous teams. So I'm excited to see what happens to the Big Ten. As I said, I like Wisconsin, and I'm glad we're in agreement there. Let's get through these last 3. Pac-12, I got UCLA. I'm not really impressed with Arizona's finish to their season. Had that big loss to Colorado. But I think Arizona is going to go deep in the tournament. But I think UCLA, after what they did to USC, I'm not very impressed with USC, as I mentioned in the previous episode. And I think UCLA is going to make it to that championship. They got that experience making it far last year in the big tournament. So why can't they do it this year in the Pac-12 tournament? So I got UCLA there. Who do you got?
Yeah, UCLA is obviously like that's a good pick for you. I do feel slightly probably more confident than you with Arizona, but I do agree that's a team that's kind of slipped down the stretch. They have the pieces in place to make a deep run, and that obviously starts here in the conference tournament. This is a Pac-12 that's really weak this year. You've got probably only those three teams, Arizona, UCLA, and then USC, that are going to get bids to the NCAA tournament. I really don't trust USC. I don't trust UCLA a whole lot. And I really don't trust Arizona as much as I should for a team that is on that one line in the NCAA tournament. I think for the Pac-12 tournament, I'm going to take Arizona, but I am not at all confident. I think the only reason that I'm going to lean towards them is because they're on the top part of that bracket where they're going to be looking at, either in one of the teams from Oregon or Colorado, versus at the bottom of the bracket, you got UCLA and then USC that are pitted against each other, assuming they both win today. I think I'm going to stick with Arizona. I'm not super confident in that pick, but I'll take the Wildcats.
Sounds good. I'm glad we disagree on some of these. Makes for good podcasting. All right. 2 more to go. Mountain West tournament. I'm taking Wyoming. I was going to take Colorado State. Jason and I actually have a tie to a player on Colorado State. His name's Chandler Jacobs, who played for our school for a little bit. They are on fire right now. But I'm taking Wyoming because you really sold me on them. I actually had Colorado State, but I changed it because it was 2 things that you said. You told me earlier in the episode of how Wyoming is the last 4 team in. And then earlier when you just said desperate teams are dangerous teams. So if Wyoming loses in this tournament, it's not a sure thing that they make it. But if they win the tournament, they're in. So I think Wyoming wants to be in control of their destiny. I mean, who wouldn't in the month of March? So I'm taking the Wyoming Cowboys in the Mountain West tournament.
Yeah, I feel like in this tournament, we mentioned earlier, this is a team or a league that's probably a 4-team league in terms of sending these teams to the NCAA tournament. I feel like you can't really go wrong with any of the top 4 teams. You've got Boise State on that one line. That this is a Broncos team that ended up winning the regular season by a game. If you look at the standings there in the Mountain West, they had a game on Colorado State. And going into last Saturday, they had a game over both Colorado State, San Diego State, and Wyoming. They were all together tied for second place. And then things kind of split up down the stretch at the back part of that last weekend of the regular season. But Colorado State is a team that I feel like when their offense is rolling, they have a chance to stay with anyone in the country, much less in the conference tournament here in the Mountain West. Colorado State's going to have a little bit of a tougher out, assuming they take on a team, like a Utah State, and they end up having to face probably, if I had to guess, San Diego State moving on to the semifinals. That's not an easy matchup, and these top 4 teams are teams that have faced off against each other and split a lot of games. Colorado State had a massive win against Wyoming, probably 2 weeks ago, and then of course Colorado State took down Boise State on Saturday. To end up splitting that season series matchup. But I think I'm going to lean towards the Rams, but I would not be surprised if a team like Wyoming makes a run at it. Boise State has not been as strong at neutral site or on the road as they have at home. So I really feel like that could go any which way. I'm going to lean Colorado State because of the consistency on offense that I've seen from them from the start to the finish of the season.
I like that pick. I like that pick a lot. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting tournament for sure. As you said, there's potentially four tournament teams in there. So it's going to be a great tournament. It's a smaller league. So it's definitely a tournament that is underrated in my eyes. So definitely watch that if you've got the time. I believe they'll be on FS1. Yeah, Fox Sports 1. So last tournament to talk about, and possibly the biggest tournament, the ACC tournament. It's in Brooklyn this year. I thought that was interesting. Duke just beat Syracuse, and that was the game that I was going to watch to determine who I thought was going to win, because I really thought for a second that Syracuse could really go all the way and possibly take the whole tournament, because the Boeheim family was really motivated to make it to that tournament. Had how Coach Boeheim has won championships with Syracuse, long legacy there, and he's got his two sons there, and they really wanted to make that tournament, but they just could not do it. Came up short against Duke. Buddy Boeheim was suspended a game for allegedly punching someone, so I thought that was interesting. But because of that result, I think Duke is going to take this. I just think Coach Krzyzewski is not going to let this one slide. He let his last home game slide, but I don't think his last ACC tournament is going to slide. So I got the Duke Blue Devils in the ACC tournament. I just think they're playing inspired basketball. They got guys in there that can really go the distance in the big tournament. And I'm excited to see Duke really make a number on the tournament, because they didn't make it last year, did they?
Last year, no, Duke. So Duke is a team that they did not make it last year, but this is a team that obviously has a lot of motivations, as you mentioned, losing that final home game for Coach K to North Carolina. But I think I'm with you. This is an ACC team, and you mentioned this is the conference tournament to watch. ACC is usually really, really strong in college basketball. They're usually one of the better conferences, but this year has just been a really big letdown and kind of a disappointment for the conference as a whole, because it's really been Duke and then everyone else. You've got a team like North Carolina that should be in the tournament without an issue, but then a bunch of teams that have a lot of work to do. You've got Miami, Notre Dame, Virginia Tech. Virginia and Wake Forest are kind of on that bubble spot, and Wake Forest just got a terrible loss to Boston College, who right now is pretty evenly matched towards the end of the first half against Miami in a game that's going on currently. But in a conference where almost every other team besides yourself, if you're thinking of yourself as a Duke Blue Devil, every other team here has been kind of mediocre this season. North Carolina may be an exception, but all these other teams haven't really had a whole lot to show for their dominance this season. So I think Duke has what it takes to go the distance, and I think they're definitely the favorite to get out of this conference tournament. I just think with the lack of quality teams that are showing that they can make it to the second weekend in the NCAA tournament, I would be surprised if anyone else besides Duke does win. Granted, Syracuse, like you mentioned, was playing without Buddy Boeheim because of that suspension today, and that likely ends Syracuse's season with the loss just a few minutes ago to Duke. That game went final not that long ago.
Yeah.
Duke being able to get past them was really the first step, and now it's like, okay, we need to keep on taking this one game at a time. And if they play focused basketball, I don't see another team in the conference that's going to be able to stay with them for a full 40 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to see what they do, and I'm glad we're in agreement there. Running out of time here. Let's go ahead and get into our teams to watch this weekend. Again, this is not necessarily a team that is hot right now, but more so a team that just you need to really look into to really assess who you how far you put them in your bracket this year. So the team that I'm going to go with is Rutgers. They tied for the Big Ten regular season title, and they really need to have a big weekend if they want to go far. And then if they do well this weekend in the Big Ten tournament, I think they can do pretty well in the big tournament. I think they can make it to the Sweet 16 this year. They almost made it last year, and I think they can do it this year if they do well this weekend. How are you feeling, Jason? Who are you taking?
So there are two teams that I want to keep my eye on. One of them I already mentioned previously is Indiana, a team that if they can tackle this matchup tomorrow against Illinois and get a win against the team that's the number one seed in the conference, I think that puts them up into the tournament. I know they're kind of on the outside looking in right now, but that winning today against Michigan coming from behind was a huge momentum boost for them. If they can get contributions from Bryce Jackson Davis and really just fuel their way through at least the next game of this tournament and get another win, I think they have a chance to get into the tournament and then maybe make a little noise. That's a team that's not necessarily super hot, but I really like looking at them and just keeping an eye on them. And then the other team that I wanted to mention is San Francisco, the team in the West Coast Conference that obviously that's Gonzaga's conference. And then the second team everyone thinks of is St. Mary's. But this is a Don's team that really has looked solid throughout most of the season. If you look at their losses, they lost by a point early in the season against Grand Canyon. They lost by 5 against Loyola, which is another tournament team. They lost by 2 to BYU. And then they have a pair of losses, actually a trio of losses if you include the semifinal in the conference tournament, to Gonzaga, which is obviously nothing to say anything bad about. Like it's Gonzaga. And then one of their other losses was to St. Mary's by 2 at home. And if you can hang with a team like St. Mary's, you have a good chance at winning. I am a little concerned with their loss at home against Portland, and on the road when they played 3 days prior to that at the beginning of February, they only won by 3 against a Portland team that I don't think is all that great. But this is a team that I think has a chance to get into the tournament and be positioned as maybe like around an 8, 9, 10 seed. And if they get a favorable matchup, you mentioned a 1 seed like Baylor getting into the South region bracket of the tournament. If Baylor makes a run at the Big 12 tournament and wins, but they've just played 3 games in 3 days, and then they have to go into the NCAA tournament, they get that first round matchup. But then say if San Francisco is like a 9 seed, that's a favorable place for them to maybe pull off an upset, get to that second round. And then I guarantee you no one's going to be picking San Francisco over Baylor in a scenario like that. But I wouldn't look away from San Francisco just yet. I think this is a team that has what it takes pretty much from top to bottom to pull off an upset. They've been playing through a league that is a lot higher quality than people give credit for with the West Coast Conference. I think they have a chance to make some noise. Am I going to guarantee it? No. But they are a team that I would say keep an eye on. Keep your eye open for them.
Absolutely. Yeah, I really like San Francisco. I'm glad that you mentioned that. I'm sorry to cut things short, guys, but that's about it for us today at the Bracketologist. Jason, I want to thank you so much for your insight and your analysis. You have been incredible, and our listeners are going to heed your advice very well, and I'm going to heed it really well when I'm filling out my brackets. So thank you so much for joining us, Jason.
Yeah, thanks for the invite. It's always good to hop on here and talk some college hoops. Now it's the fun part. We get to kick back, relax, and watch some basketball for the next several days.
Absolutely. And speaking of sitting back and relaxing, before you do that, make sure to fill out your brackets. The link will be posted tomorrow on our link tree. I will post it on my Instagram. Share it with all your friends. $100 cash. You can take $100 cash if you have the best bracket. Not a perfect bracket, but the best bracket in our group. Details will be posted on my Instagram story. But for now, enjoy some basketball before the big tournament starts. Thank you guys so much for joining us.
This has been The Bracketologist, presented by Anchor. We'll see you guys next time.